Welcome, welcome everybody. A lovely day here as we shoot for Antietam 162, Sharpsburg 162 if you'd like. I'm Gary Edelman, that's Andy Poulton behind the camera. You've already seen that we have Dennis Frye with us, so you'll hear from him in just a moment. And I think you've already figured out where we're standing, not only right in the path of a famous Alexander Gardner photo showing the dead here in the Sunken Road, forever now known as the Bloody Lane, showing that same hillside, some of the scattered trees in the distance, as well as in the photo, some of the area beyond it, which is, of course, relevant to the fight that takes place here. By way of reminder, in the morning, there's all sorts of fighting, and I mean 5 a.m., 6, 7, 8 a.m., 4 hours of continual slaughter out near the cornfield, the East Woods, the Hagerstown Pike, and the epicenter, of course. And that fighting that is the bloodiest fighting at Antietam, but after which Union reinforcements arrived. Dennis talks about them a little bit, and they're going to go into the West Woods where this Union advanced division under Sumner, the division is under Sedgwick, is going to meet disaster at the hands of a powerful Confederate counterattack. But the other two divisions of Sumner's Corps, again, Corps, Division, Brigade, Regiment, Company, okay? Sumner's got a big corps. He's got 3 divisions. One met disaster in the West Woods. Imagine if the other 2 would have followed him in there. Could that have tipped the scales for the Union? We'll never know, because the other 2 get detached and don't even know where Sedgwick is, and they're going to end up here near the Bloody Lane or the Sunken Road. The Roulette farm is sort of behind me over there, and they're going to end up gathering in that area. Famously, Roulette is a beekeeper, and one of his apiaries gets hit. The men get swarmed, and some of them said that was their most trying moment of the day, not attacking, you know, the Sunken Road, soon to be known as the Bloody Lane, but getting swarmed by bees, telling us again in no uncertain terms that these are people. These are humans, and nobody likes to be swarmed by angry bees, even if they're about to do something especially terrible. So we're going to bring on Dennis in a sec to talk about this. We've got a Union division under French attacking basically a Confederate brigade under the command of a guy named Robert Rhodes. You've probably heard of him, Alabamians. And then there's another Confederate brigade over there under Anderson, North Carolina troops, being attacked by another Union division. In other words, the Confederates are defending this Sunken Road with one brigade against one division 2.5 times its size. So that is how a lot of the Civil War is fought. The Confederates had 5 brigades around here. This is D.H. Hill's division, but 3 of those brigades went to fight near the cornfield. So bloody was and necessary was the fighting over there that it stripped the Confederates of a lot of their defenders here. So they're left with 2 brigades against 2 divisions. And Dennis will talk about this. Dennis Frye, our good friend, preservationist, author, guide, ranger, and much more.
Thanks, Gary. Hey, let me call your attention to something that's really important here. Those of you that take tours with me know that there's 2 words I really emphasize: high ground, high ground. I like to study terrain. I like to be able to examine the terrain and try to figure out what is the terrain, what is the topography telling us, because battlefields aren't maps. Battlefields aren't narratives. Battlefields are the ground. You got to have the ground. That's the reason we created this organization, so we could save the land. You need to be able to come and stand on the land to really understand what's going on. So look at the land. Look off in the distance. Now the modern building you see there, the visitor center, high ground. That's where Lee started the day. He's on high ground. He's lost that high ground. He's gone. Off to the left of that building, look at the woods, look at the trees, the West Woods. We were just there. He's lost that. So the Federal Army has literally seized the center of Lee's line, the left center of Lee's line. It's collapsed. What an incredible day it's been for George McClellan so far. So in the meantime, the Federal reinforcements were coming like this towards the West Woods. And as Gary pointed out, Lee Division, Sedgwick, continues and takes the high ground, which is already held by the Federals, and continues on beyond into the woods. As that is happening, what's happening here is this. In this lane, and you can see the Virginia rail fence as it would have been. The Confederates actually have taken the fence down and stacked it up higher on this side to give them more protection. Notice the road, which is called the Sunken Road, it sinks. It sinks down into the ground. You can see it. This is natural, and it's also caused by erosion. This road gets a lot of use. It's a shortcut between the Hagerstown Turnpike and the Boonesboro Turnpike, and so it gets heavy use by the local population. But it's a great position for defense, because you can get down in here and have this berm of the road help cover you from the enemy. This is what I want to emphasize. Lee never really expected to fight here. He didn't want to fight here. This wasn't part of this. What we're looking at here is, this is a secondary line of defense. Remember, the original Union assaults that morning are coming right at you from north to south, just like this. The fighting in the cornfield, the fighting in the East Woods coming directly at you. So this is Lee's secondary line. In case something happens to the north, and you can actually see out there in the distance beyond the Moomaw barn, which would be burning right now on September 17th, and the woods in the distance, that high ground, that's the East Woods. That's where the battle was from about 6 in the morning until 8:30. Now things shift. No longer is the Union Army coming this direction towards this position, and it's pretty quiet in this sector of the field. What's happening is McClellan sending in reinforcements from across the Antietam Creek now has shifted his emphasis to east to west because he wants to push the Confederates back and push the Confederates out and drive them beyond. Now notice the high ground in the distance where you see the tractor coming, that high ground, that ridge line, that's known as Reel's Ridge or Hauser's Ridge. That's where Lee has withdrawn to. We weren't able to see that in our last video, but it's open there. Look at that high ground. That's where much of the Army is as the action is occurring right here.
And thanks to our friends at Save Historic Antietam Foundation for clearing trees over there that allows us to see the Reel Ridge.
So General Lee, much of his forces, after he's lost the cornfield, lost the East Woods, lost the West Woods, Lee has repositioned himself on the high ground that you see in the distance. So he's in a pretty good location, actually, as a secondary defensive position. Much better, actually, than he had all day long. But look at this extending out. It's perpendicular. Look at that. It's a T. It's a perpendicular to his main position. And that's because this is a vestige. This is a leftover. This is an old position from a previous thought and the previous direction of the battle. And so as the Federal Army is moving here against this direction, it's got the Confederates on their left flank. This lane literally parallels the Federal Army as it's moving towards the woods, and it becomes an irritant. You're not just simply sitting in here twiddling your thumbs saying, isn't it a pretty day to watch the Federal Army advance? What's really going to happen is Confederate skirmishers, sharpshooters, are going to go onto some of the high ground out there and start to fire into the flank of this advancing force. This is the 2nd Division coming now. This is General William French's division. French knows there's an irritant. He knows the Confederates are here. They're not under disguise or hidden. But more importantly, look at the top of the hill. That's what you call up in the air. And I'm not talking about height up in the air. That's up in the air in that that's where your flank ends. The end of the Union Army is right there. There's nothing out here that's Union. It's all Confederate. French knows that flank is in the air. That's a danger point. French realizes that they cannot lose that high ground. So what's really happening here is they start to pivot. Instead of continuing like this, and Gary mentioned that it might have changed things if they'd gone right on into the West Woods, but what really happens is the ground is showing you what French is really doing. He sees his left, his friends, his fellow comrades, their left is exposed. You never want your flank exposed. He's going to extend the left. And so instead of going straight ahead, he's going to pivot like this, and he's going to connect to the left, and no longer is the flank in the air. But that means then that the Federal Army is coming right at this bulwark, right at the Sunken Road. And so from about 9 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon, there are going to be repeated assaults against this position. The Confederates are outnumbered, but the road's to their advantage. You want to walk into the road, Gary?
Yeah, and let me just say, by the way, so the Confederates are outnumbered, but the Union, at least at first, doesn't attack with all 3 of its brigades. They send 1 brigade, another brigade, and a lot of those are inexperienced soldiers, and then they've kind of got a more experienced brigade. I think that's Kimball's brigade, right? Where you're going to bring more together and bring more weight, divisional weight into the assault.
Yeah, it's a classic situation of where, again, the ground and the tactics don't match up because they don't bring all the division in at one time. They don't bring all that weight of numbers in to affect it. And so as a result, the Confederates are able to match up number-wise much better than they would have been. And then notice what's happening. We're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the ground here as the Sunken Road sinks deeper into the earth.
Yeah, and let me just stress that, Dennis. Every part of the Sunken Road is different. If you're at one part of the Sunken Road, you have one field of fire, and if you're at another part of the Sunken Road, it's more or less sunken, and you have a different field of fire. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, speaking of field of fire, look at this. Andy, let's pivot over here. So notice,
We're looking north now, roughly.
looking north, okay, look how far down we've come. Gary and I walked, just so you get a sense, we walked 60 yards. 60 yards. Everything's gone. Everything we saw a moment ago, Andy, do a 360. It's all gone. You can't see anything down here. That's how far down we've come in 60 yards. Again, terrain, study the topography, study the land. That's why this organization exists. That's why you help us buy the land, is because the land will speak to you if you let it. Listen to the land. And so here we are now, down here where you can't see at all. You don't know what's going on around you at all. If I were a Confederate soldier down here, this would be kind of lonely, kind of lost. I don't really have a sense of what's happening to my left or my right, my front and my back. This is isolation. But you're also protected. You're also protected because look at this. Now you see that monument. That monument is a Maryland monument. Go Maryland. I'm a native Marylander, and that's my boys. 5th Maryland right there. Fairly new regiment. Not seen any battlefield experience. They've been primarily on some off the chart defensive positions, and they haven't seen the rebels. They really have never seen what we call the elephant. They haven't been fired at to any extent. That's going to change. Now you can't see them because of this hill. This is the roulette farm, but they're coming right at you, and it's a massive amount here as we see them advancing in line, parallel line. Remember, everything in the Civil War is always in a line. Here, Confederate officers know they're coming, and they've gone up and down the line, and these are Alabama boys. This is Robert Rose in command here. He's going up and down the line saying, hold your fire, hold your fire, hold your fire, wait. And so this is what you would see. You could visualize this. First thing you would see coming up over that hill, the flag. The flag. You're going to see the colors. And you know what that means? The colors are always right in the middle of a regiment. And so even though you can't see the enemy, you can't see a single human being, you know exactly where that line is, and you know how wide that line is, basically where the colors are. So you watch the American flag rise above the horizon. Every step of the color bearer, it's going up, 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 up. And then you start to see, and you visualize this, their hats, their faces, their eyes, their necks, and their torso. And the idea was, the order was, do not fire until you see from the hips up. So they're walking, kind of coming up, literally lifting up out of the earth with every step. And as they get higher and higher and higher, and you see from here up, fire, fire, and they open up, and it is just it's a tornado that rips through the flesh of the 5th Maryland, and they just go down. And that begins what becomes wave after wave, ultimately, of Union assault against this position. And they're not going to break through. They're not going to break through. They're not going to break through.
Can I just jump in real quick to say, you know, you sometimes wonder why monuments are placed where. They're usually placed by veterans who come back decades later, and we expect them to remember. But in this case, look at that, how Dennis just described it, and we can't see the base of the monument. We can see the upper parts of the monument there. That is the furthest point of advance there. And you could, if you look around, you can see other Delaware and Connecticut monuments doing the same thing. Let's keep moving, okay?
Think of that monument as a human torso. And we are, what, Gary, 60 yards, 70 yards? Remember now, these rifles that the Confederates have here in the Sunken Road, the weapons these Alabama boys have, they are easily accurate without pointing at 200 yards.
Yeah.
70 yards. That is
And then remember the mass fire, where it's harder to miss something.
Yeah.
You know, when you and your comrades are shooting. Let me add to that.
Don't aim, just point.
You know, to make this easy, we talk about phases, right? But let's just note that some of the same Confederates, Kershaw's men who were attacking sort of the West Woods, bleed into this fight as well. These fights are connected, and you come to realize that the West Woods and the Bloody Lane are happening at the same time. Ultimately, this is only one Union division, so French's guys are pushing against Rhodes's Alabamians, but now we're entering a different part of the fight.
Right,
this is Israel Richardson's division coming
Israel
up.
B. Richardson. Let's stop here for a moment. Now look at the lane. Tower, incidentally, of course, the tower is post-war 1896 is when the tower was built. by the War Department. But you can see the confines of the lane here. The only difference is it looks more like a broad avenue than it would have been historically. Actually, it's much narrower. The fencing would have been much, much tighter on the lane itself. And so it would give you a sense of being a pathway rather than this avenue.
And let me just, since you brought that up, let me note that this lane was used by vehicles for decades. There was a road on that side for a while, right where this fence is on the right side over here, and that furthered up this bank. In other words, the bloody lane is probably a little bit deeper and it's a little bit wider, as Dennis said. We can use the photos to determine these things. The bloody lane was changing from the moment the battle started. Dennis?
So the Confederates have been holding, it's almost miraculous. We've been holding this position for close to 4 hours. Now, it hasn't been constant Federal attacks. There have been waves of Federal assaults. But it's about to end. There's just too many Yankees out there, too many Bluecoats. And General Richardson's division, which was the last of the Second Corps, remember Gary and I spoke about the Second Corps being the largest of the Corps in the Federal Army here, over almost 17,000 men. General Richardson's division is going to strike coming towards us like this. They're going to be advancing from the hill that you see behind us towards us like this. And eventually, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that end of the lane, the Federals are going to go around it like this. They're going to go around it, and they're going to flank you, envelop you on your right. Now, the Confederates see it, they know it, and in fact, they try to adjust for it. This is the North Carolina Brigade of George Burgoyne Anderson. And so they're going to turn and try to adjust for what's happening on their flank. Too many Federals. In the meantime, the Alabama boys down here have also been given orders, because it's fairly quiet in their front, so they're not firing this way anymore. They're giving orders to oblique, do an angle, turn to their right, so they can fire upon the Federals that are approaching from this direction. Oblique right is the order. We're in a battle. It's loud. People are dying. Bullets shrieking. Shells exploding. Confusion, chaos. Officers going down. Somebody mistakes oblique right and says instead about right. Now, this is an about face. You all know what an about face is. About, my back is now to the enemy. About is always preparatory to retreat. I'm leaving. This is a mistake. Now they're not going to be hold too much longer anyway. But the point is, this whole section of the line right where Gary and I am right here, it just abandons post because of a mistake in order. The Alabama boys didn't understand the order. And it's right on the hinge where they join with the North Carolinians. They're coming together right here. So you got two different commands that link at this point. Now, you're a North Carolina soldier, and these guys are going this direction. And turn with me, Andy. You can't see anything on the other side of that bend. There's a whole lot more Alabamians over there. So in your mind, the psychology of this is they're withdrawing, they're retreating, they're getting out of here. The North Carolinians that are still holding the position, away they go, out they go. And so the whole line is abandoned. Again, it's going to happen. They're not going to hold it too much longer, but they actually left because of a mistaken order. And so by the time it is over, this part of the line now is gone. It's all gone. Lee's lost this position. I'll be the first to admit, I'm going to raise my hand, put my hand on my heart, and say, I did this for decades. I would stand here and tell my groups, this was George McClellan's big opportunity. The Confederates are crushed. Lee's line is broken. Look at this gap. Look at this hole in the line. I mean, how can anybody not see it's time to put the troops in and destroy the Confederate Army, wipe out the enemy? We're going to end the Civil War right here, right now. All George McClellan has to do is have the courage, the guts to do it. Send in the reserves. I'm a fool. And for decades, I was wrong. Because McClellan knew where Lee had gone. And let's walk out, as we walk out of the lane, and see if we can show that high ground one more time out on Reels Ridge, where it would have been suicide for McClellan to attack that position.
While we're walking, let me just say, again, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. We have shot numerous videos here at the Bloody Lane, so y'all can check those out if we can cover it from the unit perspective and other perspectives as well. Hello, y'all.
These folks are from Michigan, and they're members of the American Battlefield Trust.
All right, go state.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you for your support, y'all. Thanks for being here.
Look for yourselves on video.
Something that also might have helped to that's okay. One of the things that might have dissuaded McClellan as well is that it is not like nothing else happens after the Union captures the lane. First, let's note that their fightingest commander, Israel Richardson, is desperately wounded at that point. Right at the height of the advance, the unit had actually advanced beyond the lane, okay? But the Confederates under Hill doesn't have much, but he starts throwing that back at the Union soldiers, whatever he has. Here's James Longstreet famously helping to work a cannon crew over here. The Confederates are patching it together and fighting desperately at this point. So it's not like the Confederates leave the lane and McClellan just doesn't do anything. There's a lot going on here for a little while. And again, there's a lack of leadership. French is not the man to do this. Joe Hooker is down. Sumner's with the other part of his corps, and here you've got Israel Richardson down. So it's not a great command style on the ground.
Again, that's very difficult for me to defend George McClellan, but I have to say this. McClellan sends in the reserves again.
Sixth Corps, maybe?
Sixth Corps. William Franklin, and let's walk on up here so we can show you real
and we have to wrap this up, or else we're gonna have to end this coverage here before we even get to Burnside Bridge. So let's wrap this thing up.
We're almost up. We just got to be able to see one more time where Lee is, because that's what George McClellan could see, and that's why George McClellan's not going to attack him.
Okay, so what I think Dennis is getting toward here is that numerous people just say McClellan had 30,000 troops in reserve. He didn't attack across the center. None of those things is true. He orders the 5th Corps across the middle bridge. He does order the 6th Corps across the creek. He does still have some reinforcements. Is it 30,000? No. Is it 20,000? No. Okay, so he does send troops over here. Let's see how Dennis is going to tie this thing up. Dennis always breaks out stuff and new perspectives I've never thought of.
It's Franklin's 6th Corps. They had been not here when the battle started. They're not even here. They're marching. They had been outside of Harper's Ferry. And so Franklin's 6th Corps has done a forced march that morning. When we think about the Battle of Antietam, we only think about the Confederates doing forced marches coming up from Harper's Ferry to Antietam. No, the Union Army 6th Corps did a forced march starting at 6:30 in the morning on September the 17th to get here in time. And in fact, when they arrive, turn around, what McClellan does is he relieves the 2nd Corps, which has been fighting all morning here at the Sunken Road, and he places the 6th Corps in position, taking these spots. Over here, the 6th Corps will take these positions over here that had been seized earlier in the morning. So nearly 12,000 men, 12,000 reserves of the Union 6th Corps are going to be sent from across the Antietam Creek here to this position so they can hold the high ground there and hold the ground that's been seized here. Notice the key word, hold, 4-letter word, hold, not advance. Let's finish this up. Why aren't we going to advance?
Dennis Note is walking about southward. We're looking westward now.
Look at the high ground out there. That's where Lee is. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Cemetery Ridge of Antietam. That is the Gettysburg Cemetery Ridge. Think of it that way. You all know what happened on the 3rd day of Gettysburg, July 3rd, when Robert E. Lee attacked a position like that. That ground is higher than Cemetery Ridge in terms of sheer vertical height, higher. It is a bulwark. It is an extremely good position of defense. That's where Lee is.
And Lee has cannons up there. That's the important part, right?
Absolutely. Reinforced with long-range cannon. And look at all the open ground between us and Reel's Ridge. I'm telling you, study the ground. Let the ground speak to you. I am telling you that George McClellan knew, because he could see it from his headquarters with a naked eye, the Confederate position on that ridge. He knew it was a stronger position, the strongest position Lee had been in all day. And so for McClellan to have continued the assault, and I was wrong for years, but for him to have continued the assault, it would have been suicidal for the United States Army. George McClellan actually at that moment made the right decision not to attack.
And so this is great, a great way to tie this up. Thanks, Dennis. And I've never heard this particular talk before. So before we spout, and we all do this, right? Because when something doesn't work, you tend to think anything else would have been better, right? You know, because we'll never know what your option is, okay? So before any of us spout that the 6th Corps comes up and all these other 2nd Corps troops could have simply marched upon the town that way, consider that ridge and consider the dozens of cannon, or at least the 18 cannons that Lee has up there that is going to rake your flank the entire time. And by the way, there are Confederate cannons over down near those houses over there as well. Okay, this is a strong position at this point. So thanks, Dennis, for this excellent interpretation. Thanks to Andy behind the camera. Thank you all for watching. We have a little bit more to go here at Antietam 162. We hope you're enjoying. Please share it with your friends. Check out our older Antietam coverage as well. And thanks so much for all your support of battlefield education and preservation.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.